The numbers have thinned recently, but tens of thousands of South Koreans have still been gathering in Seoul, intent on criticizing their leader, President Lee Myung-bak. Weeks of demonstrations culminated in a massive June 10th outpouring. About 100,000 protesters created an ocean of candlelight in the capital. The flames were sparked by President Lee's April deal with President Bush to resume U.S. beef imports. Many South Koreans are convinced that U.S. beef, especially from cattle older than 2.5 years, is a threat to their nation. U.S. beef was banned here after a single U.S. animal was found in 2003 to have the brain ailment known as mad cow disease. Beef trade between the U.S. and South Korea resumed last year, but all U.S. meat was supposed to come from younger cattle. The April deal lifted that restriction. Lo Kyung-soo is a professor at Seoul National University. He says for many Koreans, the beef deal creates the appearance of a cave-in to the United States.
It's not just the U.S., but it harkens back to a long history of being invaded, being subjugated by bigger powers, and even occupied militarily by the Japanese. All of those feelings of being pushed around, being persecuted by the external environment, all of that's tied in a very amorphous, very emotional way. So all of that's coming into play.
Some South Koreans, like 69-year-old Ken Jong, criticize the protests.
I think this is unreasonable and so emotional and not based on scientific fact. And people like the group emotion encourage each other, and they drive to a wrong direction to Korean people.
43-year-old Park Sun-chol took part in protests 20 years ago that led the country's military-backed regime to introduce direct presidential elections. He says these protests are meant to wake up a president who has disregarded the democratic process.
I think the process was done too hastily. The administration showed no willingness to listen to people's opinion.
27-year-old Shin Jae-yoon says Mr. Lee's background as a businessman was not good training for the leader of a democracy.
He used to lead a giant corporation where the minute he says something, someone immediately runs and does it. Now, as a president, he's still doing that, and that makes people doubt his leadership.
Kang Won-taek is a political scientist at Sungsil University. He says Lee Myung-bak can take steps to save his 4-month-old presidency.
I think if he reflects on his conduct, takes the right steps, and adjusts his leadership style, there's definitely a chance to make things better. People have not given up on him entirely, but responding to this is the key to the rest of his presidency.
President Lee has apologized for the second time in 4 weeks for failing to take public opinion into account. He is also promising the United States will help guarantee no American beef from cattle older than 30 months would make it into South Korea. Mr. Lee's trade minister is in Washington trying to turn that promise into a concrete agreement that will ease public anger. The outcome of the current crisis could determine whether the candlelight protests grow dimmer or whether Mr. Lee has a fire on his hands he cannot put out. Achin, VOA News, Seoul.